Aunt Jenny and her brother, they were put into the well. Well, everybody was out fighting the fire. It was quite devastating. The whole area had a fire. It started over, yes, they were in the well for protection, but it started on the Quebec side and came across the river by the islands, I suppose, in the Ottawa River. I don't know exactly how old they were, but it was, well, it could be figured out. I think it was 1887 or something like that.
Your time.
Oh, well before my time. Well before my, yeah.
So what was affecting your aunts when they were...
But my mother was born in 1895, and it was well before that. And my father was born in 94, so it was when their parents were young. Yeah.
I see. And this present building that you live in now, Alavida, it's built on the
farm.
On the property that
yes.
belonged to
the Caldwell.
the Caldwell farm.
And yes, it's they had 300 acres, so was a sizable farm in those days.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and so he was the first generation born in Canada. His parents came from Ireland, but I think they're really all of traces at across that they came from Scotland over to Ireland.
You mean Wesley's parents? Or?
Yes. And when Olive and I had a trip back to Ireland, we went on the original Caldwell farm, and that's at Cavan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's quite a nice farm with a lake at the bottom of it. Yeah, it was a nice experience for us. And I saw a man there, and I'd swear he was my Uncle Ernest that I was telling you about, the golf pro, and I would swear he was, and I wished I'd asked him mm-hmm. what his name was, because he just looked like as if he could have been a brother of that man.
Yes. Where did you live before you moved to the nursing residence at the Ottawa Civic?
Well, we lived in 11 different places, and we started out, I was born in Spencerville, then we moved to Fallowfield because the barn burned down, and that caused my father to sell out. And then we went to Ottawa, where he started selling insurance. And so we lived on Hinton Avenue, Fifth Avenue, Rochester, the village of Carp, the farm at Carp, Ottawa again. And then Dad was selling insurance. And then we lived in Sarnia and back to Fallowfield and stayed there for quite a while. I started, I was in grade 6 or 7 in high school. And then from there on, I went to the Civic.
We were on that trip to the Grand Canyon. I lost my glasses. I had to get another pair in Los Angeles.
You left them in the bathroom and somebody took them.
Somebody stole my glasses. I went right back, realizing I'd left them, and somebody had stolen them. They were gone.
And how did you manage the rest of the trip?
Well, I was wearing sunglasses because I had prescription sunglasses.
What was life like for you guys when you first moved out here to BC?
When I first moved out.
So were you and Jen together when you moved here?
No, I moved out
you
here
moved
by
here
myself.
alone?
Yes.
So what brought you out to BC?
Well, had graduated from Smith College School of Social Work at that time. And I had to have a job. And I could get one in Nova Scotia. I'm sure I could have gotten one around Ottawa somewhere, maybe the Ottawa Civic. And there was a job advertised out in Vancouver. And I don't care for traveling as a tourist too much. I like to go and, I feel as soon as you work in a place, you get to understand a place better. And you have to know how much effort it takes to earn money in that place, to know what it's like to live in that place, etc. And so I decided I'd come out here for a year, and I'd get that job in Vancouver, and that's why I came. Took a job at BGH.
Oh, what were you doing for that?
I was a medical social worker.
And so, what was life like in general when you first moved here? Was
Lonely.
it lonely?
Lonely. Yes, it was lonely. And that was partly due to my nature.
Well, I don't know how you found it, but something that I remember feeling when I first lived in BC, and then again now that I've moved back, is I'm reminded of how much tougher of a city Vancouver is socially. Like it just feels harder to break. It feels like people
Harder
are
than where?
than Toronto or Guelph or.
But Toronto and Guelph are places that you're familiar with, so how would you...
Guelph I
No.
wasn't. I moved there as a student.
Well, I found it hard, and yet, I think it was mostly me. I'm not flibberty-gibberty kind of person. And, but when I moved here in 1960, all the people I knew were not from here. It was very hard because I couldn't connect to anybody who had any roots and get into it. Well, I could have, I suppose, if I joined a church or done something, but I didn't do any of those things. So. Anyway, I found it difficult to get into it.
You and I have been listening to segments of 3 different interviews from my extended family. Join me as I discover my roots. This radio show is a product of my desire to connect with my Grandpa Jack. My grandpa was a fun guy who joked around with me and my siblings. Even though my grandpa was a friendly guy, I didn't feel that I had connected with him. My way of connecting with my grandpa was to ask him about his dog. When I asked him about his dog, he didn't say much at all. Now, after he has passed away, I am continuing to ask questions about his dog to connect with him and now with others in the family too. These opening comments that you've been listening to are the results of new connections that have been made with members of my grandpa's side of the family, a side of the family that I just haven't known until now. These are people who I now cherish. The 3 things that I knew about my grandpa was that he worked hard, he was a churchgoer, and loved to help people fix things. One mystery about my grandfather was his childhood dog named Carlo. I often asked my grandpa about his dog, but he always told me next to nothing. I wanted to connect with him. I felt that this story was a good place to start, and still do. Join me on this journey. Together in this broadcast, we will connect with 3 generations as I learn about my grandpa's farm dog, Carlo. You will listen to my grandpa, 2 of his sisters, 2 of his daughters, 2 grandchildren, and his only wife, my fun-loving granny.
Dad, can you remember about Carlo running down the laneway to the road to see the people that owned him?
Oh, yeah.
Did they honk the horn? And did he run to the road to meet them?
Huh?
Did they have candy or something for Carlo when they came?
You would need a candy for a dog.
This is Sharing Life, Season 4, Episode number 5. This episode is called Carlo and Family. Support for Sharing Life comes from APEC Marketing. To consult their services, go to apecmarketing.com. By email, contact asha@apecmarketing.com.
APEC Marketing, your resource for digital marketing, web, and app development tools.
This part of the show takes place in Ottawa, Canada's capital, with 2 Aunt Marys and me, John Knox. and this is our first radio broadcast.
Very good.
Out of a black floral patterned cloth bag at the foot of a rose-colored rocking chair danced a woolen thread. It bobbed back and forth while Bob Hope and Bing Crosby jibed and joshed the night away. That was yesterday evening.
And I was knitting socks for Andrew, my nephew.
The only thing between us was 3 generations. Together we were 1 reading a book, 1 knitting, and 1 just watching the old-time show.
Uh-huh. Before we shared our breaded cod dinner, we discussed the many things that we all share, and now we are sharing our relationship with you.
Here, we're all very happy that Aunt Olive, who isn't present, shared much with us through her 2 books on the family. And one of her stories about the family dog really made an impression on all of us, because our boys grew up with a next-door neighbor who had a favorite dog. Their dog, Sheba, was a really important mix in the growing time of children on both sides of the fence. Our boys loved Sheba just like Doug and Dan did. Beautiful German Shepherd dog. And when we read the story that your sister Olive wrote in her book about the family dog Carlo going missing, and how traumatic that was for Claire and for Olive, from the text we read, Claire and I burst into loud howls of pain that Carlo would go away to die alone. He would be starving and he'd be cold. We could not understand why he would go away from us to die, and all the pain that we'd felt about Grandma's leaving now poured forth. It's really, really touching the way Olive connects those 2 things.
That's right. Yes, it was.
The loss of one and the loss of another, and the fact that she, as a young person, just didn't have any experience with sharing her feelings in words.
So do you want me to talk about Carl?
Oh, please do.
Carlo was a beautiful purebred collie dog, golden color, and he had started life in Ottawa, but he had the bad habit of attacking the postman as he was delivering mail on bicycles, and he tore off the legs of 2 pair of pants. So it was my father's cousin who lived on the corner of Olivia. That was the name, Olivia. It's the corner of Colin, of Ruskin and Parkdale. The house is still there. And so they brought the dog up to the farm, and we were delighted to have him, and Carlo was happy to have the freedom of the farm too. So, yeah, we had him for many years. I think he must have been about 12 years old when he died. But still, it was a blow to Olive and Claire, especially. I was already in training when it happened, and the dog went up to a part of our farm called the Gleason place, and he was just did as they say. He died. Guess he must have known. I don't know. We were all sad to lose him. They had other dogs on the farm, but none of them meant as much as this dog did to all of us. Yeah. Anyway.
And did you feel at the time that you were able to express your feelings to your family when loss came?
I think so. Yes. We were just unhappy. And I've never had another dog that meant as much. Except I had a dog when I was in Tanzania that was pretty special. Yeah, it's a German Shepherd like you're talking about. Yeah, they're very nice. But anyway, it happens.
Now to our next interview location. If walking with a dog, it would take nearly 101 days and 11 minutes to arrive, or 43 and a half hours without traffic in a car. But if we skip the plane using the cloud, bammo, the interview is on the computer and in my pocket on a stick within minutes of its completion. So, here we are in Vancouver, British Columbia, with my grandpa's sister, Olive, and with my sister, Elizabeth, conducting the interview.
Do you still think about your dog Carlo?
No, not really. Occasionally I do. But I've had a dog since then that I was very, very fond of, and I think of him maybe a little more often.
What was his name?
Kim.
Oh, that's nice. What kind of dog was Kim?
Kim was a mongrel, which I think are always the best dogs. And I think he was part setter, maybe, of some sort, because he was kind of like a hunting dog. And the other part was collie, and that got him into trouble. He'd be trying to round up the chickens for you like a collie would do. And then all of a sudden, a chicken would start to squawk, and it was just like somebody pulled a string down right the center of his body, and he just flew for that bird. Those two strains got into a little trouble, and he was a very intelligent dog.
And what kind of dog was Carlo?
He was a collie, a long-haired, big collie, like Lassie from Lassie Come Home. He was that sort of a dog. And he was much older when I knew him, and he was quieter. But he was very intelligent.
When you knew him, so he was around when you were born, is that right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. He'd be around when I was born.
Do you relate him to your grandmother at all? Like, did you spend time with them together?
Just with the house in which we were born, he had a little spot that he stayed at the front door, and he'd always go out with anybody who went out. He had to look after them and that sort of thing. But not specifically with my grandmother.
The reward of being interested in the smaller details of my older relatives' lives is that they have taken interest in my life too. The stories that they have told me about my grandpa and their family gives me a completely new foundation for understanding my grandpa and the family that my mother came from. The rewards of my time in Ottawa were great. Why don't you join me in a future broadcast, and then you too may become more connected with your own family. This episode was originally published in April of 2016. It is now being published in July of 2020. You have been listening to Sharing Life. To contact me, use my email address, sharinglifestudios@gmail.com. Also, I have an independent board who reviews all decisions concerning these broadcasts. Thank you for being a listener. We're going to ask you to rap to finish. I'll give you a beat.
I'll give you a beat. I'll give you a beat.
That's all, folks.
I don't know.
I love it. Yeah. Well, thanks